I used to laugh when people said schools were haunted. I worked in one for years. A custodian. Nights were my shift. Cleaning halls, mopping floors, making sure the place was ready for another day of kids and teachers. Most people only see schools in daylight, filled with noise and life. At night, it's different. The lights hum. The air feels stale. The silence presses in from every corner. You hear things you shouldn't. A door creaking down a hall you know is locked. The sound of footsteps when you're alone. At first, I told myself it was in my head. A big empty building does strange things to your ears. Pipes settle, air vents groan. Even a mop handle falling the wrong way can sound like someone whispering. But then there were things I couldn't explain. Things that made me stop laughing at ghost stories. The school I worked in wasn't new. It was built in the 1950s, all brick and steel with a maze of basements, stairwells, and extra wings added over the years. Generations of kids had passed through. Some never made it out. I never asked too many questions, but every old building has its tragedies. The night I started believing, I was assigned to clean the basement storage halls. Nobody liked working down there. Even the other custodians avoided it if they could. Too damp, too dark, too far from the rest of the building. The kind of place where the lights flickered no matter how many times electricians checked the wiring. I remember walking down the concrete steps, my cart rattling behind me. My flashlight beam cut across the walls. The smell hit first. Old paper, mildew, rust, a smell that clung to your clothes even after you left. The basement stretched in two directions. To the left, locked supply rooms. To the right, a long corridor that ended at a heavy steel door. That door was always locked. I never saw anyone go in or out. The air felt colder down there. Not just cool, but biting, as if I had stepped outside in the middle of winter. My breath hung in front of me, faint but visible. I tightened my jacket and started sweeping, telling myself I'd be done in less than an hour. For the first 15 minutes, nothing happened. Just the sound of my broom bristles scraping the floor and the buzz of the overhead lights. Then I heard it. A faint sound echoing from deeper down the hall. A dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled across concrete. I froze, broom in hand, and listened. The sound stopped. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a pipe shifting or water running somewhere behind the walls. I forced myself to keep sweeping. 5 minutes later, the sound came again. Longer this time. A steady drag. My ears strained, trying to pinpoint it. The corridor was empty. The steel door was shut. There was nowhere for the sound to come from. My chest tightened. Every instinct told me to leave, but I kept working. Custodians don't scare easy. We're used to noises in old buildings, but my hands shook around the broom handle. Then something happened that made the air rush out of my lungs. I heard keys fall, metal clinking against the floor, sharp and clear. I looked down. My own ring of keys lay at my feet, though I hadn't touched them. They had slipped free from my belt without a sound, as if someone had unhooked them and dropped them there on purpose. I bent to pick them up, my hand trembling. That's when I saw it. At the far end of the hall, just before the steel door, a shadow moved. Slow, deliberate. A figure stepping out of the darkness, though no features showed. Just a darker shape within the dim light. I blinked and it was gone. The hall was empty. The door shut tight. I should have left then. No one would blame me, but I couldn't. Something in me needed to prove it wasn't real, that I hadn't seen what I thought I saw. I pushed my cart forward, each wheel squealing louder than usual. The dragging noise started again, this time behind me. I spun, flashlight sweeping across the hall. Nothing. My heart pounded in my ears. Sweat prickled under my shirt even though the air was freezing. I moved faster now, broom forgotten. My only goal was to finish and get out. I reached the steel door, put my hand on the cold handle, and froze. The handle was warm. Everything else down there was freezing, but that handle radiated heat, faint but unmistakable. I pulled my hand back as if burned. My flashlight flickered, then steadied. The silence was so thick I could hear my own heartbeat. I didn't open the door. I didn't want to know what was behind it. I turned and pushed my cart back up the hall, every step echoing too loudly. But before I reached the stairs, I heard it again. This time, not dragging. Footsteps. Slow, matching mine. A second set echoing behind me, keeping pace. I broke into a run, keys jangling, wheels of the cart rattling. I didn't look back. Not once. When I finally burst into the main hall upstairs, the air felt warm again. Normal. My breath no longer fogged. The footsteps stopped. I locked the basement door behind me and never worked down there alone again. But that wasn't the end. Because the basement was only the first place in that school that wasn't empty. Most people avoid the basement. That part makes sense. Dark, damp, out of the way. But for me, the worst nights weren't spent underground. They were spent up high on the third floor. The school only had 3 levels, but most classes were held on the first 2. The third floor was old, outdated. A wing of classrooms that hadn't been renovated in decades. Broken windows patched with plastic sheeting. Lockers with doors that wouldn't close. The kind of place the administration forgot about unless they needed extra storage space. My shift usually kept me on the lower floors. Sweep the cafeteria, mop the main hall, collect trash from offices. The third floor wasn't on my list often. But some nights when the rotation landed on me, I had to take the long climb up. Alone. The stairwell groaned under my steps as I hauled my cart upward. Each floor felt heavier. The air got colder, thinner. By the time I reached the top landing, I was already sweating, even though the air cut like ice. The hallway stretched out in both directions, lined with closed doors. A long corridor of peeling paint and buzzing lights. Even in daylight, it had a reputation. Teachers told stories of students sneaking up there and coming back shaken. Kids swore they heard crying when the halls were empty. I told myself those were just stories. Still, when I stepped into that hall, something in my gut twisted. The silence wasn't normal. On the first 2 floors, you'd hear the hum of vending machines, the echo of pipes, the distant rattle of an HVAC fan. Up here, there was nothing, no sound. Just the crack of my cartwheels echoing too loud against tile. The first room I unlocked was stacked with boxes. Old textbooks, water-damaged yearbooks, forgotten supplies. Dust hung thick in the air. My flashlight beam cut across desks shoved against the wall, their legs rusted, their wood chipped. The smell was different up here. Not mildew like the basement, but dry rot. The scent of things abandoned too long. I set to work sweeping, forcing myself into a rhythm. Push, scrape, collect. Push, scrape, collect. It kept my mind from wandering. But no matter how I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling I wasn't alone. It started small. A faint shuffle like paper sliding across a desk. I froze, ears straining, nothing, just dust and silence. I swept again. Another shuffle. This time behind me, I turned, flashlight cutting through the gloom. Empty room. Boxes, desks, shadows. Nothing moved. I exhaled, long and shaky. Told myself it was a mouse. Just a mouse. But then I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. It came from the far corner behind the stacked boxes. Low, steady, like someone trying to stay hidden but failing. My mouth went dry. My heart slammed against my ribs. Slowly, I lifted the broom handle like a weapon and stepped toward the sound. Each footfall echoed against the cracked floorboards. The breathing stopped. I reached the corner, flashlight trembling in my hand. The beam fell on nothing but boxes, dusty, untouched, empty. I swallowed hard. My own breath rasped loud in the silence. Maybe it was me all along. Maybe the air was so thin I was hearing myself without realizing it. That's what I told myself. I turned back toward the door. And that's when I saw it. The classroom door, the one I'd left wide open, was now almost closed. Just a narrow crack of light spilling through. My skin crawled. My pulse roared in my ears. Someone or something had moved it. I ran. I didn't think. I just ran, cart abandoned, broom clattering to the floor. My shoulder slammed the door open. I burst back into the hallway, panting, chest heaving. The corridor stretched empty in both directions. Silent. Still. I should have gone downstairs. Left the third floor for good. But something stopped me. Maybe pride. Maybe fear of being seen as a coward. Or maybe it was curiosity. The kind that kills cats. Because the truth is, part of me wanted to know. I forced myself to keep working. Room by room. Door by door. The second classroom was worse. The door creaked on rusty hinges as I pushed it open. Inside, rows of desks sat facing a chalkboard that hadn't been touched in years. The faint outline of old lessons still clung to the slate, smudged but visible. Math problems. Names. A doodle of a heart carved into the corner. I stepped inside, my shoes crunching on broken glass. A window had shattered long ago. The plastic sheeting flapped faintly in the wind, though no air stirred. As I swept, I felt it again. That prickling at the back of my neck. The sense of eyes on me. I turned slowly. Flashlight scanning the rows of desks. For a split second, I saw movement. Something ducking low behind the back row. A shape too fast to catch. Who's there? My voice cracked, echoing down the hall. No answer. I stepped closer, pulse hammering. Desk by desk, I checked. Empty. All of them empty. But when I reached the last row, I froze. On the desktop, scratched deep into the wood, were words I'd never seen before. Don't breathe. The letters cut raw, jagged as if clawed in by desperate hands. My chest tightened. I straightened, light sweeping across the room. And then I heard it again. Breathing. This time, not from behind me, not across the room, but right next to my ear, hot, wet, close. I staggered back, flashlight jerking wildly. Nothing there. Empty air, my knees almost buckled. I stumbled into the hall, slamming the door shut behind me. I should have left. I know that now. But I didn't. Some force kept me there, pushing me deeper into the third floor. The last room was at the very end of the hall. The door hung crooked on its hinges, as if someone had tried to tear it off. My hand shook as I pushed it open. Inside, the room was bare. No desks, no chalkboard. Just a single chair in the center facing the wall. The air felt wrong. Too heavy. My flashlight flickered, then steadied. I stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind me. I jumped, spinning around, fumbling for the handle. It wouldn't budge. Stuck fast. The light wavered. Shadows stretched along the wall, twisting, bending, then the breathing returned. Louder, surrounding me, filling the room. I pressed my back to the wall, flashlight beam shaking. The chair in the center creaked, slowly, like someone had just sat down. I aimed the light. The chair was empty, but the creaking didn't stop. It grew louder, rocking back and forth, and then, in a voice so faint I almost thought I imagined it, I heard a whisper. Get out. The light cut out completely. I don't remember how I got out of that room. I don't remember how the door opened or how I found the stairs. All I know is I ran until my legs gave out, until I collapsed against the first floor wall, gasping for air. After that night, I refused to work the third floor alone. But even with someone else on shift, I always felt it. The eyes, the breath on my neck. The doors moving on their own. The basement had shadows. The third floor had voices. But the auditorium had something worse. It wanted me to listen. The basement unsettled me. The third floor terrified me. But the auditorium nearly broke me. It was the largest space in the school, a cavern of wood, velvet, and shadows. Hundreds of seats stretched in neat rows, each one covered in dust and age. The stage loomed at the far end, curtains heavy with mildew. Their once rich red fabric faded to a sickly brown. By day, I'd seen pictures of what it used to be. Assemblies, plays, concerts, bright lights shining down on smiling faces. But at night, standing alone in that dark hollow, none of that mattered. At night, the auditorium was a tomb. My routine didn't take me there often, but when it did, I dreaded it. The space seemed too large, too empty. My footsteps echoed for seconds, bouncing back distorted like something else was walking just out of sync with me. The first time it happened, I was sweeping the stage. The boards creaked under me, groaning like bones under strain. I focused on the sound of the bristles pushing dust into piles, keeping my head down. Then I heard it. Whispers. At first I thought it was the wind. But no air moved in that still, heavy room. The whispers grew clearer. Not one voice but many. Some high, some low. Some sharp, some soft. All overlapping, as if dozens of people were speaking at once in the dark. I froze, broom clutched in both hands. My ears strained to pick out words, but they slipped away like water. The voices circled, rising and falling, moving through the seats. I lifted my flashlight, shining it across the rows. Empty. Dust motes spun in the beam, but no one sat in those velvet chairs. The whispers swelled, filling the space. My skin prickled. My throat went dry. Then they stopped. The silence crashed down so suddenly it hurt. I exhaled shakily and turned back to my sweeping. But the quiet didn't last. A new sound began, footsteps not from the seats, from above me. The catwalk. The metal grid stretched high above the stage, lined with spotlights and ropes. But the ladder to reach it had been chained and locked for years. Nobody could be up there. Still, the sound echoed clearly. Slow, deliberate steps on hollow steel. Clang, clang, clang. I tilted my light upward, beam sweeping across the ceiling. For a split second I saw it. A shadow crossing behind the railing. Then the spotlight above me flickered to life. Its beam cut through the dark and landed dead center on stage. On me I froze, caught in its glare. Dust swirled in the cone of light. My shadow stretched long and thin across the floorboards. The voices didn't return. The footsteps didn't return. But the silence pressed down on me harder than the noise ever did. I dropped the broom and ran. By the time I reached the hallway, my legs shook so badly I could hardly stay upright. I didn't stop until I'd reached the janitor's closet, slamming the door behind me like it could keep the whole building out. I told myself it was faulty wiring. Just old lights kicking on, maybe a raccoon in the ceiling. But deep down I knew better, because that wasn't the last time. The second time was worse. I was assigned to clean after a rare evening event. A local group had rented the auditorium, and by the time they cleared out, the seats were littered with programs and snack wrappers. My job was to tidy before locking up. The building was quiet. Too quiet, considering dozens of people had filled it an hour before. I started in the back rows, working my way down. The beam of my flashlight cut across seat after seat. I bent to pick up a crumpled paper when I heard something. A cough, dry, sharp, from the middle rows. I froze. Slowly I lifted my light and swept it across. Empty seats. I told myself it was the building settling, or maybe the sound carried from outside. But then came another sound, a chair creaking like someone leaning forward. The hairs on my arms rose. My breath caught. I shined the light again. Nothing. Only the stale air shifting around me. But as I turned back to work, I saw it. One seat. Row D. The cushion depressed. Slowly, as if someone invisible had just sat down. My knees nearly gave out. The flashlight beam shook. The seat stayed that way for seconds, sagging under unseen weight. Then it rose, the cushion lifting, returning to normal. Something had been there I didn't think. I didn't finish. I left the mess behind and locked the auditorium door from the outside, my hands trembling so badly I fumbled the key twice. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that seat sinking under a body I couldn't see. The last time was the worst. The night that made me swear I'd never step foot in that place again. I'd been sweeping the backstage area. The heavy velvet curtains hung stiff and rotting, their folds like massive shrouds. The ropes creaked faintly in the stillness. At first it was quiet. Then the whispers began again. This time I didn't freeze. I tried to ignore them, sweeping harder, faster, but they rose above the sound of the broom, louder, more insistent. Then, beneath the voices, I heard something else. A laugh, low male, right behind me. I spun, heart lurching. Nobody stood there. Just ropes and curtains, but the laugh came again, deeper, closer. My flashlight beam trembled across the stage. That's when the curtain shifted. Not from a breeze, not from my movement, but like someone had brushed past it. I aimed the light. The fabric bulged outward slowly, as if a hand pressed from the other side. I staggered back. My throat locked. The handprint spread against the curtain, pushing harder, shaping fingers, palm, knuckles, then another hand. And another. The fabric strained, dozens of hands pressing, clawing, trying to push through. The whispers turned to cries, to screams. I dropped the broom and ran, but the stage seemed to stretch forever. My footsteps thundered. My lungs burned. As I neared the exit, the spotlight above flickered on again, flooding the stage. I risked one glance back. The curtain swayed violently, as though dozens of figures thrashed behind it. Hands pressed out, shapes forming, faces straining against the fabric, mouths open in silent screams. The sound cut through me, not with ears but with bone. My vision blurred. My legs carried me through the door. When I burst into the hall, the air felt thinner, cleaner. The screams stopped the moment the door slammed shut. I never went back. Not for a mop. Not for a broom. Not for anything, and I wasn't alone. Other custodians refused that space. Teachers avoided rehearsals there, moving events to the gym instead. The auditorium became a hollow shell, locked most nights, forgotten by everyone but the unlucky few who had to clean it. But I'll never forget the voices, the footsteps, the laughter, the hands pressing through velvet like a barrier too thin to hold them back. If the basement held shadows and the third floor held breath, then the auditorium held something worse. It wanted me to listen. It wanted me to see. It wanted me to stay, and if I hadn't run, maybe I would have. I still work nights, still sweep halls, still haul trash, still walk empty spaces while the world outside sleeps. But I will never walk those three places alone again. The basement, the third floor, the auditorium. Each one showed me something I can't forget, something I can't explain. The basement gave me the footsteps, the steady dragging shuffle of something that never showed itself, never needed to. The sound alone carved its way into my bones. Every time I climb stairs now, every time I hear shoes scuff on tile, I wait for that drag, for that cold rush of air that doesn't belong. The third floor gave me the breathing, the steady rasp that filled locked rooms, that whispered against my ear when no one stood there. That sound didn't just scare me, it lived inside my chest. It made my own lungs feel borrowed, like I was breathing with someone else in the auditorium. That place gave me everything at once. Voices, shadows, hands pressing through the thin barrier of fabric, reaching for me as though 100 unseen bodies were trapped behind it. That was the night I stopped pretending it was all in my head. Because 3 nights, 3 places, 3 encounters, it was too much for coincidence. I've heard the story since. Every school has them. The kid who died during rehearsal, the student who never came back from detention, the custodian who swore he saw something no one believed. They're the kinds of tales people share in whispers, laughing, pretending not to take them seriously. But those people don't hear the basement door creak open on its own. They don't walk the third floor and hear a desk scrape across the floor when no one touches it. They don't stand under a spotlight that flickers to life above them when the switch is locked. I do, and I know this. It doesn't matter if you believe in ghosts. It doesn't matter if you think there's always a rational explanation. When you're alone in silence that thick and dark, that deep, your body knows the truth before your mind admits it. You are not alone. I've tried to explain it to myself 1,000 times. Old pipes, faulty wiring, the tricks of a tired brain. But then I remember the weight of that seat sinking under something invisible. I remember the wet heat of breath on my neck. I remember the scream of wood as dozens of unseen hands clawed against the curtain, desperate to be free. There is no comfort in rationalizing. There is no safety in pretending, not for me, not anymore. So now I move differently, I sweep faster, I keep my head up. I never let myself get cornered. And I never ever put headphones on during a shift, because I want to hear it coming. Maybe that's foolish. Maybe it doesn't matter if I hear them or not. But silence is worse. Silence is where the whispers start. And I know this too. Those things, whatever they are, they don't just stay in one place. Sometimes when I'm cleaning a first-floor hallway, I hear a thud from above. A chair scraping on the third floor. A cough in the distance. Sometimes when I'm emptying bins near the gym, I feel the same cold rush of air that used to hit me in the basement. And sometimes, when I'm mopping near the office, I catch the faintest hum. Voices, a chorus. The same tone that filled the auditorium, bleeding through the walls like the building itself remembers. They don't leave. They shift. They follow. They wait. And the scariest part isn't that they're there. The scariest part is that no one else notices. Teachers laugh it off. Kids make up stories for fun. The principal waves it away, just another old building making noise, but I know the truth. This school is alive. Not in the way people are, but in the way wounds are. Scar tissue, memory, pain etched into wood and stone. And when the sun goes down, it breathes again. I used to tell myself I could handle the quiet. That's why I took the job. Nights were simple. No students, no chaos. Just silence, but the silence isn't empty. It never was. Now every night when I clock in, I wonder if this is the night it finally shows itself. Not just footsteps. Not just breathing. Not just whispers. But a face, a figure, something undeniable, and I wonder what I'll do if it does. Will I run? Will I freeze? Or will I finally know what's been waiting for me all along? The truth is, I don't want to find out. But the other truth, the worst one, is that I don't think I get to choose. Because whatever lives in this school, it knows me now, and it isn't finished.